The champagne was still cold in my hand when my phone rang, shattering what should have been the most peaceful moment of my life. My son's voice carried that familiar tone of entitlement that comes from never having had to struggle for anything. 24 hours later, I found myself standing in the foyer of my own home, watching a parade of strangers track sand across my marble floors as if they owned the place. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Let me take you back to how this beautiful mess began. 3 months ago, I sold Carter Marketing Group, the company I had built from nothing over 30 years. The buyers paid $3 million in cash, and after taxes, I finally had enough to do exactly what I wanted. I could buy my dream beach house and disappear from the exhausting corporate race forever. The house was everything I had ever imagined during those endless 18-hour workdays. 6,000 square feet of weathered wood and glass perched on the Malibu dunes, with panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean and enough space to host my entire extended family for the holidays I had been too busy to enjoy for decades. I had been there for exactly 8 hours when Ethan called. "No, congratulations on your retirement, Mom." "No, the house looks amazing." "Just straight to business." "Mom, we need you to move to the guest room upstairs," he said without hesitation. "Jessica's entire family is flying in tomorrow for a 2-week vacation, her parents, her sister's family, her brother, and his girlfriend. That's 11 people in total." I actually laughed out loud. "Ethan, honey, this is my house. If you and Jessica want to vacation here, we can set up some dates that work for everyone." "No, you don't understand," he said quickly, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "We already booked their flights. They're expecting to stay in the master suite and the main bedrooms. The guest room upstairs has a great ocean view. You'll be fine up there." His casual assumption that I would simply go along with it left me speechless. This was the same son I had put through business school, the one whose failed restaurant I had bailed out twice, whose mortgage I had helped with when his graphic design company nearly folded. "Ethan," I said finally, keeping my voice calm, "I bought this house to relax and enjoy my retirement. I am not running a hotel for Jessica's family." His tone shifted, turning cold, in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of his father during our divorce. "Look, Mom, you've got this huge house all to yourself. It's selfish to keep it empty. And if you can't be reasonable about sharing it, well, I heard there's a really nice assisted living facility just down the Pacific Coast Highway." The silence was heavy with threat. My 35-year-old son was essentially telling me to make room for his in-laws or risk being abandoned again. "I see," I said quietly. "And what if I refuse?" "Then I guess we'll have to reconsider how much help you actually need at your age," he replied smoothly. "Living alone in such a big place, managing everything by yourself, maybe it's too much responsibility for someone in her mid-60s. After I hung up, I sat on my new deck, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and amber. It should have been peaceful, but all I could think about was the smug satisfaction in Ethan's voice. He thought he had me cornered, thought I was just another helpless older woman who would cave to emotional blackmail. What Ethan didn't know, what I had learned from 3 decades in business, was that the best victories often come from letting your opponent believe they've already won. The next morning, I began preparing for their arrival, but not in the way they expected. I woke to the sound of car doors slamming and voices echoing across the morning air. Apparently, Jessica's family had decided to arrive at 7 o'clock sharp without warning, because why would they ever consider that the homeowner might want advance notice? From my upstairs window, I watched a caravan of rental cars pour into the driveway and unload what looked like a small army. Jessica directed traffic like a general leading troops into battle, pointing toward different entrances and barking orders about luggage distribution. Her parents emerged from the first car, both wearing aggressively casual vacation outfits that screamed, "We're here to be served." What struck me most was how comfortable they all seemed. There was no hesitation, no moment of politeness, no glance toward the door wondering if they should knock first. They moved with the confidence of people who had already been told that this was their space now. I slipped on my robe and went downstairs, curious to see how they would handle meeting the actual owner of the house. "Oh," Jessica said, startled when she saw me, though she quickly recovered. "Maggie. Ethan said you'd already moved upstairs." "Perfect. The master suite gets the best morning light, and Mom has arthritis, so she really needs the ground floor bedroom." Her parents swept past me without a word, wheeling their suitcases toward my room like hotel guests checking into a resort. Jessica's sister Rachel and her husband corralled their 2 teenagers upstairs to the guest rooms, while her brother Kevin and his girlfriend claimed the den with the pull-out sofa. "Coffee's in the kitchen," I said mildly, watching the procession continue through my house. "Oh, we brought our own," Jessica chirped, opening my pantry without hesitation and beginning to rearrange my neatly organized shelves. "Mom's on a special diet, and the kids are picky eaters. We'll just need you to clear out some refrigerator space." I watched as she removed my groceries, stacking them neatly into a cardboard box as if she were cleaning out an employee's desk. The audacity was almost impressive. "Almost. Where would you like me to put these?" I asked, lifting the box. "The garage fridge should be fine," she said over her shoulder. "Ethan told us you had one out there." Of course he had. He must have given them a full inventory of my property. I couldn't help but wonder what else he had shared during their little planning sessions. By noon, my house had been completely transformed. Pool toys littered the deck, wet towels hung over my antique furniture, and the kitchen looked as if a hurricane had swept through. Jessica's mother sat at my dining table, complaining loudly about the water pressure in her shower, while her husband critiqued my cable channel selection as though he were conducting a customer survey. "Maggie," Jessica's father called out cheerfully, "we're going to need the Wi-Fi password. And do you have any of those little drink umbrellas? The kids are making tropical smoothies." The casual expectation that I would act as their personal concierge was breathtaking. But I simply smiled, gave them the password, and excused myself to the garage, where I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to my attorney, Linda Park, who had handled the villa's purchase. "Linda, I need you to pull the deed on the Malibu property. Specifically, confirm the exact legal ownership structure." The second call was to my accountant. "David, remind me how we structured the purchase of the house. Walk me through the details again." And the third was to my private investigator. "Jack, I need a background check run on some house guests. Full financial workup, employment history, social media dive, everything." "Yes, I'll pay your rush fee." By dinner time, while Jessica's clan helped themselves to steaks from my freezer, I had all the information I needed. But I wasn't ready to act just yet. It was better to let them get truly comfortable first. That night, as I lay in the small guest room listening to 11 people enjoy my home below me, I smiled in the dark. Tomorrow would bring the first surprise. The next morning, I woke to find my coffee maker occupied by a line of Jessica's relatives treating my kitchen like a hotel breakfast buffet. Her mother, Patricia, had taken over my entire counter space to prepare what looked like a gluten-free, dairy-free, joy-free feast for her various dietary restrictions. "Maggie," she said without looking up, "we're going to need you to run to the store. Kevin's girlfriend is lactose intolerant, and Rachel's youngest is allergic to, well, practically everything." I made a list. She handed me a 3-page shopping list written in the confident, looping script of someone who expected to be obeyed. Items like organic coconut milk, the expensive kind, not that watery stuff, and gluten-free bread that doesn't taste like cardboard were highlighted in multiple colors according to urgency. The casual assumption that I had suddenly become their unpaid grocery service was remarkable, even by my family standards. But instead of arguing, I simply took the list, smiled politely, and headed into town. What they didn't know was that I had errands of my own to run. My first stop that morning was the hardware store, where I picked up several items that would prove useful later. Next, I stopped by the local phone company to discuss a few changes to my service plan, then made a quick visit to my bank. The branch manager and I had a fascinating conversation about account security and access permissions. By the time I returned home with the groceries Jessica had demanded, her family had made themselves even more at home than before. Kevin had rearranged my living room furniture to improve the television viewing angle, while Rachel's kids had discovered my art supplies and were now creating their own masterpieces directly on my dining room walls. "Oh good, you're back," Jessica said, not bothering to help me carry the heavy bags. "We're planning a big barbecue tomorrow night, about 30 people. Ethan's friends, some locals we've met, and a few business contacts. You'll need to pick up steaks, hamburgers, hot dogs, all the sides. I texted you the details. 30 people in my house without my permission." "That sounds like quite a party," I said evenly. "It's going to be amazing," Jessica replied, her excitement unchecked. "We're really going to put this place on the map. Ethan said you never entertained much, so this will be good for you. Get some real use out of that beautiful kitchen." I noticed she had already begun moving my personal items out of the common spaces. Family photographs, my books, even my mother's antique vase had been relocated to make room for their so-called vacation aesthetic. That evening, while they planned their grand event from my deck chairs, I made another round of calls from the garage. This time, it wasn't to lawyers or accountants but to old business contacts who still owed me favors, big favors. "Mark, it's Maggie Carter," I said when one of them answered. "Yes, I know I'm retired, but I need a small favor. How quickly can your catering company handle a last-minute event? 30 people tomorrow night. Money's no object, but there's a catch." The next morning brought chaos. Jessica's family was in full preparation mode, inviting half the beach community and promising premium steaks and top-shelf liquor, in my home. Patricia spent the morning criticizing the organization of my kitchen while simultaneously taking over every inch of counter space for her elaborate party prep. Around noon, I heard Ethan's voice outside and went to the window. He had arrived with even more guests, old college friends who, apparently, had been promised a weekend getaway at the family beach house. The casual way he handed out my spare keys to people I'd never met was particularly impressive. "Mom," he called out when he spotted me. "There you are. Hope you're ready for a real party. We've got some important people coming tonight, business networking, you know. This place is perfect for making connections. Important people, in my house, for Ethan's networking." The irony was priceless. I spent the afternoon on the deck, reading and observing their preparations with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. They had completely taken over, transforming my peaceful retreat into a full-blown party venue, never once asking if I minded having my home invaded by strangers. Around 5 o'clock, I excused myself to get ready for the evening. After all, I wouldn't want to miss their big party. What they didn't know was that I had prepared a few surprises of my own. By 6, cars lined my driveway like a luxury car showcase: sleek Mercedes, polished BMWs, and shiny Range Rovers belonging to the so-called important guests Ethan had invited to network at his mother's expense. From my upstairs window, I watched as strangers wandered through my garden, helped themselves to drinks from my bar, and lounged on my furniture as though they owned it. Jessica had outdone herself with the decorations, calling it beach house chic. She had rearranged 30 years of my collected treasures to suit her taste. My grandmother's handmade quilts were now draped across chairs as casual throws. My award plaques had been tucked away as too corporate. My personal photographs were hidden in a closet so they wouldn't clutter the aesthetic. But the final insult came when I saw Ethan giving someone a tour of the house, describing it as the family property, and casually mentioning that he was now handling all management decisions since I was getting on in years. Getting on in years. The words echoed in my head. At 64, I chose my outfit carefully for the evening, a simple black dress that had served me well during more than one hostile corporate takeover. If you're going to deliver devastating news, you might as well look good doing it. The party was in full swing when I finally stepped outside. Ethan stood on the deck, entertaining a crowd with stories about acquiring the villa and his grand plans to maximize the property's potential. Jessica flitted between groups, playing hostess with impressive confidence for someone who had never paid a single dollar toward the mortgage. Maggie. Patricia spotted me first, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for inconvenient elderly relatives. There you are, dear. Could you check on the appetizers? I think they're running low. Of course, even at my own party, I was expected to play kitchen staff. Instead, I walked to the center of the deck and raised my voice just enough to capture everyone's attention. Excuse me, everyone, if I could have just a moment. Conversations gradually faded as more than 30 strangers turned to look at the woman they had been told was just the aging mother who came with the house. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us tonight, I began, smiling pleasantly. It's wonderful to see so many new faces enjoying this beautiful property. Ethan beamed, clearly proud that his mother was finally playing along as the gracious hostess at his networking event. Before we continue, I said, taking out my phone, I have a few quick announcements. That was when the catering truck pulled into the driveway. But it wasn't the small, discreet local service one might expect for a beach barbecue. This was Peterson's signature catering, complete with uniformed staff, a full mobile kitchen, and enough equipment to host a corporate gala. What's that? Jessica asked, her hostess smile faltering slightly. Oh, that's dinner, I said cheerfully. I thought since we were having such a large party, we should do it properly. Prime rib, lobster tails, champagne service, the works. Ethan's expression shifted from pleased to confused to visibly worried within seconds. Premium catering for 30 people wasn't cheap, and I could practically see the numbers spinning in his head. Mom, we already bought steaks, he muttered. Oh, don't worry about those, I replied lightly. We'll save them for another time. Turning back to the crowd, I smiled. The catering staff will be setting up shortly, so if everyone could give them some space. Moments later, Mark Peterson himself appeared, clipboard in hand, wearing the kind of satisfied expression that only comes from being paid double the usual rate for a rush job. Ms. Carter, he said smoothly, where would you like the champagne station? The champagne station? Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Right by the pool, Mark, I said. And make sure everyone gets the good stuff, Dom Perignon, not the house champagne. I could feel the energy around me shift instantly from casual barbecue to high-end event. These were people who recognized quality when they saw it, and Dom Perignon was definitely not backyard fare. The catering team moved with military precision, transforming my deck into an elegant dining space, complete with linen-covered tables, crystal glassware, and silver service. Within 30 minutes, what had started as a simple cookout had become a luxury dinner party with a price tag that could rival most people's monthly mortgage payments. Mom. Ethan pulled me aside, his confident networking smile replaced by panic. What is this going to cost? I smiled sweetly. Don't worry, honey. It's all taken care of. What I didn't tell him was exactly how it was being handled. That revelation would come later. For now, I was perfectly content to watch 30 strangers enjoy a $12,000 dinner party while my son slowly began to realize he might not be as in control of the situation as he had thought. The morning after the party brought a reckoning that almost made the champagne headache worthwhile. I found Ethan and Jessica sitting at my dining table, huddled over their phones, frantically calling credit card companies and checking bank balances while surrounded by the wreckage of the previous night's extravaganza. Empty Dom Perignon bottles lined the counter like expensive soldiers, and the catering invoice, which I had left conveniently on the kitchen island, served as a sobering reminder of reality. $12,000, Jessica whispered, staring at the bill as if it might burst into flames. For one dinner party. Ethan was on his third phone call to the bank, trying to explain why he suddenly needed his credit limit increased by exactly $12,000. The conversations, from what I could tell, were not going well. Good morning, I said cheerfully, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the expensive machine they had commandeered 3 days earlier. "How's everyone feeling after the big party?" "Mom, we need to talk." Ethan's voice carried the tense edge of a man watching his financial future circle the drain. "About that catering bill." "Oh, wasn't it wonderful?" I interrupted brightly. Everyone loved the lobster. Mark Peterson really outdid himself. "We can't afford $12,000 for one dinner party," Jessica snapped. I tilted my head thoughtfully. "That's strange. I was under the impression you were handling all the management decisions for this property now. At least that's what you told all those nice people last night." The color drained from Ethan's face as the meaning of my words sank in. If he had publicly claimed responsibility for managing the house, then logically he was also responsible for its expenses. "But, Mom, I never actually said." "Oh, but you did," I interrupted gently. "Several people mentioned how impressive it was that someone your age had acquired such a beautiful property and was managing it so professionally." I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring both the flavor and the moment. "They were particularly fascinated by your business model. Using family assets for networking events, quite innovative." At that moment, Patricia, Jessica's mother, appeared from my master bedroom wearing my robe and holding my favorite coffee mug. "Maggie, dear," she said without the slightest hesitation, "we're going to need fresh towels. And the Wi-Fi is running slowly. Can you call someone about that?" The casual entitlement was breathtaking, even after 3 straight days of examples. Before I could respond, my phone rang. "Ms. Carter, this is Laura Peterson from Pacific Estates Realty," a polite voice said. "I have a few questions about your villa listing." "Villa listing?" I repeated, curious where this might be going. I put the call on speaker. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson, but I haven't listed any property for sale." "Oh, that's odd," she replied. "We received an inquiry yesterday from an Ethan Carter claiming to represent the owner for a potential sale. He provided detailed information about the property and said he was authorized to handle all real estate decisions." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ocean through the open windows. Ethan's face shifted from worried to panicked, while Jessica stared at him as if she were seeing a stranger. "I see," I said calmly. "Well, Mr. Carter is not authorized to represent me in any real estate matters. If someone has been sharing information about my property without permission, that's quite concerning. Should I file a report with the authorities? Impersonating a property owner is a serious matter." Ethan frantically shook his head, mouthing no. But I pretended not to notice. "Let me think about that and get back to you, Mrs. Peterson," I said smoothly. "Thank you for calling." After I ended the call, the silence in the room stretched until Patricia, blissfully unaware of the tension, piped up again. "Maggie, about those towels. Get out." Her head jerked up. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out. All of you. Pack your things and leave my house." Ethan found his voice. "Mom, you can't be serious. We're family." "Family doesn't impersonate each other to real estate agents," I said evenly. "Family doesn't throw $12,000 parties on someone else's credit. And family certainly doesn't threaten nursing homes when they don't get their way." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "You have 2 hours to collect your belongings and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'll be calling both the police and Mrs. Peterson back to file those reports." What followed would teach them more about family than they had apparently learned in their entire lives. The exodus began immediately, though not with the order one might expect from people who had spent 4 days treating my house like a private resort. Instead, it devolved into a chaotic scramble of accusations, blame-shifting, and desperate excuses that would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. Patricia stormed out of my bedroom dragging her suitcase, muttering about ungrateful hosts and false advertising. Kevin's girlfriend loudly complained about having to cut their vacation short because of my unreasonable behavior. Rachel's teenagers, however, looked relieved. Apparently, sharing a house with that many adults hadn't been their idea of fun either. But it was Ethan's reaction that surprised me the most. Instead of apologizing or trying to make things right, he doubled down on his arrogance. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. Do you even know who some of those people were last night? I was building valuable business relationships, connections that could benefit the entire family." "The entire family?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the family you threatened to dump in a nursing home if I didn't comply with your demands?" Jessica tried a softer approach, her tone dripping with manipulation. "Maggie, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can work something out, split the time at the house, share expenses." "Shared expenses?" I repeated, almost laughing. "Like the $12,000 you can't afford to pay? Or the groceries I bought for your family's special diets? Or maybe the utility bills that tripled when 11 people moved in?" That was when Ethan played what he clearly believed was his trump card. "Fine," he said sharply, "but you're going to regret this. You think you can live in this huge house all alone? At your age? What happens when you fall? When you can't manage the upkeep? You're going to need family, and we won't be there." The threat hung in the air like smoke, and I could see in his eyes that he thought he had finally won. He believed he had cornered me with the fear of ending up old and alone. What Ethan didn't realize was that he had just handed me the perfect opportunity for my final move. "You know what, Ethan? You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "I can't manage this house alone. It's far too much responsibility for someone my age." His expression softened into smug satisfaction. "So, you'll reconsider?" "Which is why I sold it," I interrupted. The words landed like a bomb. Ethan's mouth fell open, and Jessica froze mid-motion, a folded beach towel still in her hands. "What do you mean, sold it?" Patricia demanded. I walked to my desk and retrieved a folder I had been saving for exactly this moment. "I mean, I sold it yesterday morning. All cash offer, quick closing, perfect timing." But you can't have sold it. We're staying here. We have plans." "Had plans," I corrected gently. "The new owners take possession next week. Professional property managers from San Francisco, lovely people. They plan to rent it out to carefully screened families who appreciate peace and quiet." Of course, that wasn't entirely true. What I had actually done was transfer the villa into an LLC I controlled, managed by a company specializing in high-end vacation rentals. But the effect was the same. Ethan and his entitled family were no longer welcome, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. "You can't do this." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. "This is our family home." "No, Ethan," I said evenly. "This was my retirement home, the one you told me I was too old to manage, the one you threatened to take away from me if I didn't give in to your demands." I closed the folder with a satisfying snap. "But you were right about one thing. I do need family I can count on. I just realized you're not it." The next 20 minutes of their departure passed in a blur of slamming car doors and muttered threats about lawyers and family loyalty. But as the last rental car disappeared down the driveway, something unexpected happened. My phone rang. "Ms. Carter, this is Robert Park from Malibu Property Management," said the voice on the line. "We just wanted to confirm that the Carter Villa is ready for its first rental guests. They're arriving tomorrow for a 2-week stay. Payment has been received in full." I smiled, gazing out at the Pacific, mine to enjoy again. "Yes, Mr. Park. Everything's ready. I think you'll find our guests much more appreciative than the last group. After all, the best revenge isn't just success, it's profitable success." But my story wasn't over yet. In fact, the real surprises were only beginning. The new renters arrived exactly on schedule, the Mitchell family from Austin, a polite couple with two well-behaved teenage daughters who spent their first hour apologizing for disturbing me and asking permission to use the pool. The contrast with my previous guests was so stark it would have been funny if it hadn't been such a relief. "Mrs. Carter," Mrs. Mitchell said carefully, "we just want to make sure we're not imposing. The property management company mentioned that you live on site." "I have a small apartment above the garage," I lied smoothly. What they didn't need to know was that I had moved back into my master bedroom the moment Ethan's convoy vanished. "Please, treat the house as your own. That's what you're paying for." The rental income was significant, $7,000 for 2 weeks, with bookings solid through the summer. Not only had I reclaimed my peace, but I'd also turned my unwanted hospitality into a profitable business. Sometimes the universe has a wicked sense of humor. My quiet morning coffee was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a tailored suit holding what looked like legal documents. This should be interesting, I thought. "Ms. Carter," she said briskly. "I'm Heather Collins from Collins and Meyer Law Group. I represent your son, Ethan Carter, in a property dispute matter." Of course he'd hired a lawyer. I should have expected it, though I was mildly impressed he'd managed to scrape together the legal fees given his recent financial troubles. "What can I do for you, Ms. Collins?" "My client believes there may have been irregularities in the recent property transfer. He's concerned about possible elder abuse, specifically, financial exploitation of a vulnerable family member." The audacity was breathtaking. Ethan was actually trying to claim I was mentally incompetent after I'd outmaneuvered his attempt to take over my home. I had to admire the creativity, even as it infuriated me. "I see," I said calmly. "And what exactly does your client consider irregular about a homeowner making decisions about her own property?" "Well," she said, glancing at her notes, "the sudden sale, the isolation of family members, and the apparent confusion about management responsibilities. My client is particularly concerned about the emotional distress you may be experiencing after your recent retirement. Major life transitions can cloud judgment." "Emotional distress," I repeated with a faint smile. They were going to paint me as a confused old woman having a breakdown. The fact that Ethan knew me well enough to craft that narrative made it even more insulting. "Ms. Collins, I appreciate your concern," I said, leaning forward slightly, "but I'm curious. Did your client mention the $12,000 catering bill he authorized at my property? Or his unauthorized communications with real estate agents claiming to represent me?" Her confident expression faltered. "I'm sure there are explanations." "Oh, I'm sure there are," I replied evenly. "In fact, I think this conversation would be more productive if we involved my attorney. She specializes in elder law, particularly in cases of financial exploitation by adult children." The color drained from her face. In the legal world, elder financial abuse was serious business, and the evidence trail Ethan had left behind was extensive: credit card charges, witness statements from the catering company, recorded calls with real estate agents. It would make any prosecutor's job far too easy. "Perhaps we can arrange a meeting to discuss this matter more thoroughly," she offered weakly. "Perhaps we can," I said. "I'll have Linda Park's office contact you to schedule something." After she left, I called Linda immediately. "Maggie," she said as soon as she picked up. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you about this. Ethan's lawyer called me yesterday, fishing for information about your mental capacity. I told her that in 30 years of representing you, I've never met a sharper businesswoman. He's really going for the incompetence angle, classic desperate move. The thing is, you've got documentation for everything, witnesses to his behavior, and a paper trail that makes him look like he was systematically exploiting you. If he pushes this, it's going to backfire spectacularly." Still, as I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wouldn't give up so easily. He had invested too much pride in his failed power move to retreat gracefully. And I was right to worry. The first sign came 3 days later when Mrs. Mitchell approached me with visible discomfort. "Mrs. Carter, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this," she began, but a young man came by yesterday claiming to be your son. He seemed quite upset and wanted to know our rental rates and booking schedule. My blood ran cold. Ethan was investigating my rental operation, searching for weak spots to exploit. What did you tell him? I asked. Nothing, of course, she said quickly. It seemed inappropriate to discuss your business with someone we didn't know, family or not. But he was very persistent. He said something about health concerns and your ability to manage such a large property. The manipulation was textbook Ethan, planting seeds of doubt about my competence with my own tenants, hoping they'd report concerns to the property management company or local authorities. Clever. Infuriating, but clever. Mrs. Mitchell, I said sincerely, thank you for handling that with discretion. If he returns, please don't hesitate to call the police. I haven't authorized anyone to ask about my property or management decisions. That evening, my phone rang again, confirming my worst suspicions. Mom, we need to talk, Ethan said, his voice dripping with smugness. I've been doing some research into your recent activities, he began, like the fact that you're running an unlicensed bed and breakfast out of a residential property. Do you have any idea what the zoning violations alone could cost you, or the liability issues if something happens to one of your guests? The threat was clear: comply or face regulatory harassment that could jeopardize my home. Interesting theory, I said. Tell me, Ethan, did your research also uncover that the property is properly zoned for short-term rental use, fully licensed through Los Angeles County, and that my insurance policy specifically covers vacation rentals? The silence on the other end was satisfying. Of course I had done my homework. 30 years in business had taught me to anticipate every possible complication. You can't keep me away from my own family's property forever, he said bitterly. It's not your family's property, I replied calmly. It never was. It's my property, I said firmly, the one I bought with my money and the one I can do with as I please. We'll see about that, Ethan snapped before hanging up. But even after the call ended, the threat lingered. He was clearly building towards something bigger than legal filings or zoning complaints. 2 days later, I discovered what he had planned. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the deck when a van pulled into my driveway. The logo on the side read California Care Services, and the woman who stepped out wore medical scrubs, holding a clipboard filled with official-looking forms. Mrs. Carter, she said politely, I'm Janet Torres, a social worker with Adult Protective Services. We've received a report of potential self-neglect and possible exploitation by caregivers. I need to conduct a welfare check. My son had reported me to Adult Protective Services. He had actually accused his own mother of being a vulnerable elder in need of government intervention. The sheer cruelty of it made my hands shake with rage. Of course, I said evenly, forcing my tone to stay calm. Please come in. I assume you'll want to see the living conditions and speak with me privately. The inspection that followed was detailed and professional. Janet checked my refrigerator for adequate food, examined my medications for proper labeling and dosage, reviewed my finances, and assessed my hygiene and mental state. What she found was a spotless, well-maintained home and a capable woman running a legitimate short-term rental operation. My documentation demonstrated sound financial judgment, not exploitation. Mrs. Carter, she said carefully, I have to ask about the person who filed this report. They claimed you were being isolated by caregivers and pressured into financial decisions you didn't understand. The person who filed this report, I said, is my son. He's angry because I refused to let him use my home as a free vacation resort for his extended family. When I declined, he threatened to put me in a nursing home. Now he's apparently decided to involve the government in our family dispute. Janet's expression hardened. Are you saying this report was filed maliciously? I'm saying, I replied coldly, that it was filed by someone who sees my independence as a problem to be solved. After she left, assuring me the case would be closed as unfounded, I sat on the deck watching the Mitchell family enjoy their peaceful vacation. It hit me then that Ethan had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. My counterattack began with one phone call to Jack Reynolds, the private investigator I'd used for corporate due diligence back in my business days. If Ethan wants to play hardball with government agencies, I told him, I'll remind him why you never pick a fight with someone who has more resources and fewer scruples. Jack, remember that background check you did on my house guests? I continued. I need you to dig deeper. Full financial forensics, employment history, legal background, everything. How deep are we talking, Maggie? He asked. I want to know what they had for breakfast last Tuesday, I said. These people have declared war on my independence, and I intend to win, decisively. The results arrived 2 days later in a thick manila envelope, and what they revealed was worse than I'd imagined. Ethan's design business was 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. Jessica had maxed out 4 credit cards funding their lifestyle, including the so-called vacation at my villa. Most telling of all, they had recently applied for a home equity loan using projected inheritance from my estate as collateral. They had literally been counting on my death or incapacity to solve their financial problems. But the real bombshell came on page 12 of Jack's report. 6 months earlier, Ethan had consulted 3 different elder law attorneys about filing for conservatorship over an aging parent with declining judgment. He had been planning to take over long before our confrontation about the house. The cruelty of it took my breath away. While I had been celebrating retirement and looking forward to family time, my own son had been researching how to have me declared incompetent. I immediately called Linda Park. Linda, I need you to draft some documents, a restraining order, elder abuse charges, and a potential lawsuit for attempted financial exploitation. Maggie, she said gently, are you sure you want to take it that far? Family court can get ugly. He called Adult Protective Services on me, Linda. He tried to have the government declare me incompetent based on lies. This stopped being a family matter when he decided to destroy my reputation for money. That afternoon, while the Mitchells enjoyed their last few vacation days, I initiated phase 2 of my strategy. I had learned long ago that the best way to defeat an enemy was to eliminate their motivation to keep fighting. The first call was to Ethan's landlord, a commercial property manager I'd known during my career. A few strategic questions confirmed that Ethan was behind on rent and making increasingly desperate promises about upcoming family funds to buy time. The second call was to his credit card companies. After years of handling corporate finances, I knew exactly how to phrase concerns about potential fraud without making accusations I couldn't prove. By evening, Ethan's carefully constructed world began collapsing with the precision of a controlled demolition. At exactly 6:47 that evening, my phone rang. What did you do? His voice was raw with panic. I protected myself, I said calmly, by making sure the right people have accurate information about your financial situation and recent activities. You destroyed my business, my credit, everything, he shouted. I simply documented your behavior for legal purposes, I replied. If your business and credit are ruined, perhaps you should think about what choices led you here. You can't do this to family, he cried. You're absolutely right, I said evenly. You can't do this to family. You can't threaten them, exploit them, or try to have them declared incompetent for your own gain. I'm glad we finally agree on that. The line was quiet for a long moment before his voice came back, small and uncertain, a tone I hadn't heard since he was a child. What do you want? Finally. The question I had been waiting for. I want you out of my life, Ethan. Permanently. No more calls, no more legal threats, no showing up at my property or harassing my tenants. In exchange, I won't press charges for the APS fraud or the credit card bills you can't pay. And if I don't agree, he asked bitterly. Then a judge can decide whether your behavior qualifies as elder abuse, I said coolly. And you can explain to a courtroom why you thought threatening your mother with a nursing home was appropriate leverage for a free vacation. I could hear him breathing, calculating his odds. I need time to think, he said finally. You have 24 hours, I replied. After that, my attorney files the paperwork, and this becomes public record, something that will follow you for the rest of your life. But as I hung up, I knew Ethan well enough to predict his next move. He would never accept defeat gracefully. His final attempt came exactly 18 hours later, and it was more vicious than anything I'd anticipated. I discovered it when Mrs. Mitchell knocked on my door, her face pale and distressed. Mrs. Carter, she said anxiously, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we've been getting disturbing phone calls. Someone claiming to be your son has contacted our employers, our neighbors, even our children's school. He's telling people we're staying in an unsafe situation with an unstable elderly woman. The strategic brilliance of it was infuriating. Ethan couldn't attack me directly anymore without risking criminal charges, so he had decided to attack my tenants instead. If he could convince my tenants to leave and spread rumors that my property was unsafe, Ethan could destroy my rental business and force me into the financial dependence he had planned from the start. What exactly is he telling people? I asked. That you're mentally unstable, Mrs. Mitchell said softly, that you've been making irrational decisions, and that it's dangerous for us to stay here. He even implied we might be enabling elder abuse by paying rent to someone who's clearly incompetent. She handed me a small notebook where she had carefully documented each call, times, phone numbers, and the specific accusations Ethan had made. The woman had, without realizing it, created a prosecutor's dream file of harassment evidence. Mrs. Carter, she continued, we don't want to get involved in your family matters, but this is starting to affect our jobs and our children's schools. We may have to end our stay early. Of course, they would. Ethan was counting on it. He had calculated that reasonable people wouldn't tolerate being dragged into someone else's family chaos. He wanted them gone, to leave me isolated, humiliated, and financially vulnerable. But he had made one critical mistake. He had assumed I would respond like a victim, not like the businesswoman who had spent 30 years outmaneuvering corporate predators far more dangerous than him. The first call I made was to Jack Reynolds. Jack, I need full documentation of harassment activities, phone logs, social media records, everything that shows a clear pattern of malicious intent. And prepare a detailed report outlining his financial motives for this behavior. The second call was to my attorney. Linda, file everything. Restraining order. Elder abuse charges. Harassment claims. Civil and criminal routes, I want them all explored. This ends now. But the call I was most eager to make was the third one. Ethan, we need to meet. Today. Mom, I think we should both cool down, he said. No, I replied. We're meeting today, or tomorrow you'll be explaining to a judge why you've been harassing innocent families and interfering with a legitimate business operation. Your choice. 2 hours later, Ethan sat across from me at Linda's law office, looking like a man who'd finally realized he was drowning. Gone was the smug confidence of the son who once threatened me with nursing homes. What sat before me now was a frightened, desperate man who had gambled everything and lost. Before we begin, Linda said calmly, spreading several documents across the conference table, I want to make sure everyone understands the legal exposure we're dealing with. The papers told a brutal story, evidence of financial exploitation attempts, harassment, false government reports, witness statements from multiple parties, the kind of case that any prosecutor would love. Ethan, I said quietly, I want you to understand something. 6 months ago, when you started consulting attorneys about conservatorship proceedings, you made a choice. You decided to treat your mother as an obstacle, not as family. Everything that's happened since then, all of it, is the direct consequence of that choice. His face went white. How did you? I know about the consultations, I said. I know about the loans you tried to secure using my projected inheritance as collateral. I know everything. Linda slid another folder across the table. This, she said, is a full financial audit of your household for the past year. The spending patterns, the timing of the debt, the assumption of inherited funds, it paints a very clear picture of motive. Ethan stared at the pages like they were a death sentence. In many ways, they were. What do you want? He whispered. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes for the first time in months. I want the truth, Ethan. When did you start planning to take control of my finances? When did you decide I was worth more to you incapacitated than independent? And most importantly, did you ever actually love me as your mother, or have I always just been your retirement plan? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the room. His answer would decide whether there was anything left between us worth saving. Ethan's hands shook as he reached for the water glass Linda had placed in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It started after Dad died, he said. My ex-husband had passed 3 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving Ethan his only male role model, and apparently some deeply warped ideas about responsibility. Dad always said you were too independent for your own good, Ethan continued. That women your age need guidance, structure. Before he died, he made me promise to take care of you when the time came. The words hit me like physical blows. Richard, my controlling ex-husband, was still manipulating our son from beyond the grave. When you sold the company and made all that money, Ethan said, I panicked. I thought you'd make reckless choices or get taken advantage of. The villa seemed like such a waste, all that space for one person. So, you decided to take over? I asked quietly. I decided to provide guidance, he said desperately. Just like Dad told me to. But you wouldn't listen. You acted like I was trying to steal from you instead of protect you. Linda's face remained professionally composed, but I could see the disgust in her eyes. She'd seen this before, adult children convincing themselves that exploitation was just another form of love. Ethan, I asked slowly, when did protecting me turn into taking over my home and threatening to have me institutionalized? When you wouldn't be reasonable, he said, and this time, the mask slipped completely, revealing the resentment and entitlement underneath. You had this huge house you didn't need, Ethan said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and regret. You had money you couldn't possibly spend, and you were wasting it, sitting there alone instead of sharing with family. Sharing with family, I repeated, or providing free vacation accommodations for your in-laws while you used my property for business networking? He flinched but pressed on. Everything I did was for the family, the connections I was making, the business opportunities that would have benefited everyone eventually. Including the part where you researched having me declared incompetent? I asked. The question hung in the air like a verdict. Ethan's face cycled through denial, defiance, and finally a defeated acceptance. The lawyers said it was the only way to protect you from yourself, he muttered. They said someone your age shouldn't be making major financial decisions alone. Linda leaned forward, her tone sharp but professional. Mr. Carter, did any of these lawyers ever suggest that your mother was actually showing signs of cognitive decline? Or were you simply shopping for someone willing to tell you what you wanted to hear? The silence that followed was damning. I stood up, exhausted by the entire pathetic scene. This was my son, the child I had worked 2 jobs to support, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose failures I had quietly funded again and again, and he had planned to destroy my independence for his own gain, all while convincing himself it was for my protection. Linda, I said firmly, proceed with every available legal remedy. I want restraining orders, harassment charges, and a comprehensive legal barrier between this person and my life. Mom, wait. You're not my son anymore, Ethan, I said quietly. Sons don't research how to have their mothers declared incompetent. Sons don't threaten nursing homes when they don't get their way. Sons don't call government agencies to report their own parents as abuse victims. I turned to face him one last time. You want to know the ironic part? If you had simply asked to visit the villa sometimes, would have said yes. If you had been respectful, grateful, kind, would have shared everything with you eventually. But you couldn't wait for generosity. You had to take control. His face crumpled. I can change, he whispered. We can fix this. No, we can't, I said softly. Trust that's been shattered this completely can't be rebuilt. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I believe you. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Ethan, I added, that $12,000 catering bill you authorized? I've decided not to pay it. Since you publicly claimed management authority over the property, the catering company will be pursuing you for payment. I'm sure your lawyer can explain your legal exposure for unauthorized contracts. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation from the Mitchell family. Their oldest daughter was getting married, and they asked if they could hold the ceremony at that beautiful beach house where we had such a peaceful vacation. The rental income from wedding events turned out to be even more lucrative than short-term stays. Ethan sent one final letter through his attorney, a formal apology requesting visitation rights and suggesting family counseling. I had Linda reply with a simple statement: Miss Carter has moved on with her life and wishes you well in yours. Because that's exactly what I had done. I had moved on, to a life where my independence was respected, my choices were my own, and family meant people who loved me, not people who wanted to control me. Some mornings, sitting on my deck and watching the sunrise over the Pacific, I still felt a faint sadness for the son I had lost. But mostly, I felt gratitude for the life I had saved. My own. The villa became everything I had dreamed it would be, a place of peace, beauty, and true hospitality, just not for the family I had once imagined sharing it with. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst impulses, even when that someone is your own child. Especially when that someone is your own child. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.